Olá, daqui a Rafaela Cortês. A entrevista que vais ouvir foi gravada durante a produção da série Indústria da Ajuda na Palestina. Se ainda não a ouviste, aconselho-te a fazeres isso primeiro e depois voltares aqui. Esta é uma entrevista em inglês ao economista Raja Khalidi, diretor do Instituto de Investigação de Política Económica da Palestina, conhecido pelo acrónimo mais. O Instituto foi fundado em 1994, durante o processo dos Acordos de Oslo assinados no ano anterior. Foca-se na investigação de políticas públicas, no que pode ser feito e nas consequências do que é implementado. Na prática, o MAS não faz investigação que não seja orientada para políticas públicas e não concebe políticas públicas que não sejam baseadas em evidência científica. É formada por uma equipa onde quase todos são académicos. Ainda assim, diz Raja Khalidi, procuram traduzir o seu trabalho de uma forma acessível para quem está fora da academia. Raja Khalidi é economista, especializada em desenvolvimento. Trabalhou 28 anos na Conferência das Nações Unidas sobre Comércio e Desenvolvimento, a UNCTAD, entre 1985 e 2013. Nos últimos 5 anos que lá esteve, foi chefe do gabinete do diretor da Divisão de Globalização e Estratégias de Desenvolvimento. Mas deixe que seja ele a apresentar-se.
Myself, anyhow, I've been working in the Palestinian economy since I was younger than you, at least academically, and continue to do so. So I, have done other stuff, including my work in UNCTAD. I was in UNCTAD for many years, working on the Palestinian economy and then the global economy. And I've written a lot on Palestinian economic development in Israel, in the West Bank, occupied territories, Jerusalem, some of my areas of special concern, etc. History of economic doctrine, if there's such a thing exists, if we could say. Is there such a thing as Palestinian economic thought? I'm not sure. Anyhow, so that's where I come from. And today, we'll talk about these matters with Raja Khalidi, not with the Director General of MAS.
Em maio de 2023, eu, o Bernardo Afonso, a Margarida David Cardoso e o Ricardo Esteves Ribeiro gravamos com o Raja Khalidi em Ramallah, na Palestina. Começamos por falar sobre Rawabi, uma cidade palestiniana construída do zero, o maior investimento privado da Palestina, por iniciativa do empresário Bashar Masri. Depois falamos sobre a normalização imposta pela integração forçada da economia palestiniana com a israelita, sobre a história das políticas de base económica criadas pelo governo de Israel e as suas consequências. Umas notas para seguires melhor a entrevista. Importa saber que territórios de 48, ou só 48, é o nome dado pelos palestinianos àquele que é hoje considerado o Estado de Israel, e que dunum é uma medida de área. Um dunum equivale a 1000 metros quadrados. Por último, esta entrevista aconteceu antes da intensificação da agressão e o genocídio em Gaza, a partir de 7 de outubro, e antes da administração Trump ter desmantelado a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, a USAID, em julho de 2025. Durante anos, a agência foi uma importante financiadora de projetos focados na normalização de relações e cruzamento económico entre israelitas e palestinianos. Agora sim, fica com a entrevista. So in 2008, Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad invited international investors to the first ever Palestine Investment Conference designed to introduce Palestine into the global economy. He called it Palestine is throwing a party and the whole world is invited. This is one of the places where he introduced Rawabi, a planned private city, and the vision of Bashar al-Masri, a businessman considered one of the richest people of Palestine. Who is Bashar al-Masri and why did he want to build a city from scratch?
Yeah, you link the two events. I don't think they necessarily, they were marketed. Rawabi was launched in that respect, in that context, but let's say they're two different phenomena arise, two different examples of perhaps what you would consider the same phenomena. To be honest, the marketing of that conference was really very Madison Avenue poorly advised. So, but that shows you what I suppose the economic culture was sort of how it conceived it in the system, and the economic elites conceived themselves. Bashar al-Masri is self-made to the extent that anybody from the Masri family is. Obviously the family is wealthy, but I don't think he was, personally wealthy. And he built himself as a professional to begin with, and then struck some very good deals, investment deals, at a very shaky time, let's say 2000, we're talking about 2008, 7, 8, 9, when, there was very little confidence of anybody putting their money here, donors were filling the gap, but anyhow, private investment was, so he was able to mobilize this significant, $500 million, is it? 450 million, I don't know, Qatari, initial investment, I believe. And his own, he didn't put his own, he was able to do because of his business acumen was to very, successfully buy up the land, basically, around what the proposed city. Buy up and at good, what ended up to be a very good deal. So that's where I think his capital in the company comes from, rather than necessarily, because as I said, he was a business consultancy he had until Rawabi. So linking the two is not really helpful. One, represents the mercurial, let's say, rise of a young, not so long any longer, but captain of capital, if you wish. And one that's not unusual in Palestine, but of course it has to do with corporate and family to a certain extent links. But it's very much about this guy. He's a phenomenon, one of a kind in our experience. And the idea of Rawabi, I guess, is part of his own, call it neoliberal if you want, but it's very, if you want, Western capitalist, middle bourgeois, whatever, vision of the good life, which he was able to envision for him, not for himself, but the idea is that there's this, burgeoning middle class that is thirsty for this sort of a lifestyle.
And is that
so
true?
He was selling a lifestyle. He wasn't selling, real estate, if you know what I mean. And they still are selling a lifestyle, trying to sell a lifestyle.
We wanted to talk about that because, so we had the tour, we went there, and Rawabi is meant to house up to 40,000 people, according to the spokesperson we met.
Right, yeah.
Currently live there now 5,000 people, I think, and it's not permanent. Mostly, he told us that a lot of people just buy houses and go there for weekends or vacations. But he also told us that the range of prices are pretty much within the average of Nablus and Ramallah. Is that true in the sense that he talked about the middle class? Is Rawabi built for middle class?
Oh, I think it was very poorly financial. I think they misdiagnosed the social cultural attraction and the market for that sort of. It was never suggested that it was going to be, middle income housing. It was always suggested as a model city for upcoming. Look at the posters. The people that look like you, not me. So the idea was, people who could pay what people were paying here, but with definitely as a premium. In Ramallah, you can get something for, it's not that much. I don't think any longer the differential between Rawabi and, there's other options, don't forget, and it's affecting what the prices that Rawabi can sell for, like Rihan and some of these other settlements which are coming up between here and sort of all of that area. So there's that aspect, namely that it's not, I don't think, exorbitant, okay? And it's not gone up since it started. If anything, prices in some ways maybe have been depressed, and they've been willing to sell less, perhaps because they want to sell as many of the apartments they can. Now, I understand that there's 5,000 built. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, and eventually 8,000 to be built. So when you hear, the 40,000 is, I think the idea is a 5-person occupancy. That's the assumption. So when they say 1,000 people living there, is that what they said?
5,000,
so
actually.
That means that they're saying that that's 1,000 apartments inhabited, which I'd like to know, does that mean that only 1,000 have been sold? Now, I've understood that all have been sold, but that the only ones that are inhabited are perhaps, and of those, the question is how, they're inhabited, as the spokesman mentioned to you, partially. How partially, and who is it? If you look, the information that we have generally as citizens, so to speak, or people who go there, is that a lot of the people, of those 1,000 apartments that are inhabited are from 48. So that's the first important thing. So we're talking about maybe up to half of those, if not more. And they don't come that often because it turned out not to be really what they wanted. The dream was different than the reality. The reality, I've talked to several people from 48 who bought and who are happy because they don't think they're going to lose their money. But there's issues about community. There's issues about it's the fact that it's largely uninhabited. There's issues about it's not so practical. We thought we would come and spend the weekend. Me and my brother-in-law, they bought an apartment. We bought an apartment, but we could come. They couldn't come, so nobody's going now. So things like that. In another case, I was told that a whole building was bought by an extended family from one of the Palestinian villages there. So that must be a very interesting thing to see how that's turning out, because I know villagers from Palestine. So to see them in a whole, building living together would be interesting. And then you have a lot of the people who've bought but don't live there rent out. And who do they rent out to? You're aware who they rent out to mainly.
We've heard some rumors from villages. I mean, we haven't been able to confirm it, that a lot of Israeli Jews live there.
No, it's bullshit.
Okay.
That's crap. Sorry. There are a lot of Israeli Arabs who live there who speak Hebrew, but,
Yeah, because there are people from the 48.
Yeah,
Palestinians
from the 48. So, no. Nobody's bought. They can't buy. I mean, they wouldn't be allowed to buy. I can assure you of that. So good. I'm glad you say rumors, and I've just quashed them. No, very specifically the people who work in the Q Center, who are from other. So in the end, the irony really is that this city, which was built to attract the yuppies from the north and the center and Jerusalem perhaps, and 48, who wanted a different lifestyle and who were willing to leave their village and to live 5 days a week at least when they're working in Ramallah and Rawabi, didn't work. So instead you have migrants in search of work at Rawabi, plus a few perhaps who were students here and there who were renting, things like that. So it's. I don't think that the reality has turned out to be like the dream was intended, and it's going to be hard to see how they can turn it around. They can probably sell off everything, but it's not. This idea that it's going to turn into a vibrant city is taking a lot longer than I think they were hoping, and I don't know how much that affects its financial valuability, but it certainly proves the point of its critics that it was ill-conceived somehow, and in different respects.
But you do think that the point is to have financial viability?
The point is...
Yeah, in the sense...
Yeah, of course the point is. But I think they've already... anybody who put money into that has recouped what they put in, including Bashar. Either by the... if it's correct that 5,000... somebody has a calculator. 5,000 by 100,000, it gives you what? How many million? 5 billion? I don't know. 500 million?
Cannot do that.
I would have thought that the capital cost of the establishment, the building, has been at least recouped by the investors. Now, why does it have this Q Center, for example? Obviously, it was part of the intended original thing, but the original thing was that you have 5,000
people living there,
more than 5,000 people of that class who are willing to buy Gucci or whatever it is, the different brands that they have, and that he opened, I think, during Corona or just before, luckily for him, because it kept some cash, but not much, because he was, that it was probably costing them more than it was bringing in. Because if you go there, you'll see that people love to go around and walk and look and sit and drink coffee and check stuff out. Maybe, every once in a while, somebody will buy a Adidas or a Boss suit or whatever. But if you look at the number of people walking around with bags and the number of people not, for example, it gives you the impression that it's not really, anyhow.
Yeah, I think.
But don't forget that the Rawabi, as far as Bashar al-Masri is concerned, is only one of his many now engagements.
Yeah, I think when we were there, we definitely saw that. I feel like there were more employees from the cafes and the stores than actual people having coffee. Well, it was a weekday, and we were at around like 4 or 5.
Yeah, if anything, it perks up at 5, 6. So and weekends, obviously, weekends are fairly active, I suppose.
Do you think that the PA's position on Roabi is also a reflect of that? So the PA was supposed to invest around $150 million on Roabi infrastructure. I would say school, police station, and other public
That was
service.
the original. Okay, I didn't know those.
Yeah, I was asking why didn't this happen? Do you have any position on this? Have any idea why?
I guess the PA. No, I don't know the details of. And I mean, maybe that was the original thing in 2008 when they launched it in the economy. Yeah, but that was a marketing brochure. I mean, that wasn't a financial plan. I'm sure it was a hope. It was an intention. It was a way of embarrassing the PA into trying to, And it's an assumption, correct, that public installations, when you establish a new city, at least, should be taken by the public authorities. So, I mean, if it was calculated at that amount, it's probably accurate. Why they didn't is because I don't know. I suppose they didn't have money for that sort of thing, to be honest. And if they saw Bashar and the Qataris have the money to do all of this business, they can't build a school and a mosque and a police station. So, which he did. In the end, you saw the mosque and the school.
Yeah, the English
It's fine.
School,
It's great. Let it be. I mean, you should. No, to be honest, you're building a new city with all those apartments. You can build a school, a mosque, and a police station.
Big mosque.
So, I mean, if I was PA, that's probably the way they would have thought. I mean, and I would add, they did their bit. They got them to. Not expropriation, but it was an expropriation. Sorry, I think it was even called that. At a market, what was then still a good market price deal for the buyers, 17,000 dinars per dunam, whereas in 2007, 8. So this is when all of the attempts to buy the available land at low prices had been exhausted. And when there were issues not only of zoning Roabi contiguously, which required basically expropriating land from Atara, Ajur, and maybe the other village, I'm not sure. And doing that, and attaching it to they had to compensate owners in those two towns. So whereas they began buying land before there was any Roabi, and before anybody knew there was going to be a Roabi,
they started buying.
Through a number of people, they bought up land at 2,000, 1,000 dinars, 3,000, 4,000, whatever. Which was a great price for the local villagers.
But
for
now
land
it's worth
that nobody was interested in.
But now it's worth much
Hold
more.
on. And then they expropriated and gave owners in 2012, was it maybe? I don't know, 2011, 2010, I'm not sure. 17,000 dinars. So this is like 1.4 to the dollar. And now, people don't sell for 60, 70. I know people at the fringes from Ajul, for example, who won't sell even for 60 or 70 or 80.
About that, the Roabi spokesperson we talked to said that 85% of the land of the city now occupies was fairly bought from the owners, and that only
15% were bought and expropriated. Yeah, well, there
by
you go.
The PA.
There's the financial viability. So 85% at 3,000 dinars, cheap. What? 20%?
Yeah, 15%.
20% at 17,000 dinars, bardo cheap, really. I mean, if you think of the total investment cost, you could even calculate that. Go back and find out how many dunams and just play with the average. I mean, 3 because I know a lot of people who sold for less and some who sold for more. And then 17 because that was known as a price. And so it would be interesting to see.
So it was a good deal for Roabi, not for
think of it this way. You bought up 80% of the land. Let's say it's 800, whatever it is, 1,000 dunams. So I'm not sure. Check it out. For 3,000. And the rest for 17, and you capitalize that into probably $500 million worth of your share in this project. So that's, I think, how he capitalized. How he bought a lot of land for very little, and translated that into the assets of the city.
A lot of people in Ajud said to us
and
that...
I suspect he still owns, I mean, the land is all in the name of Beiti, which is the company he owns. It's not in the name of Rawabi city.
Okay. A lot of people in the near village told us that they feel like the land was stolen from them because they didn't know the project. Many of them say didn't receive any money still.
And they feel like they were forced to sell.
Yeah, I mean, forced to sell. I don't think there was anybody forcing anybody to sell. I think there was just very, persuasive samsars, brokers.
And little understanding from what is happening.
Brokers. There was there, in that sense, nobody was coming saying to them, hey, we're building the brand new city of Rawabi and it's going to be we're going to sell land for, apartments for 100,000. Can I buy your dunam for 1,000? No.
Yeah. Do you think?
But I don't think any that's not the way capitalism works. So unfortunately.
Yeah. Do you agree
there should be rules, perhaps. I'm not sure, but one would assume, in fact, probably in Portugal, if somebody wants to establish a new city, everybody knows before they. So in that way, everybody would have had to sell at 17, which would have been great. But so in the end, I think what you're talking about is genuine in the sense. I don't think they were ripped off. They were ripped off, but they were not. They did get money. Most people. People who didn't, in a lot of cases, by the way, it's because of all of the very complex inheritance arrangements whereby the son can sign on behalf sometimes of the sister, the brother can sign on behalf of the sister, or the sister doesn't know how to enforce her rights, more likely. And so she says, I was never got anything, but her brother probably did. I'm saying that there was no confiscation of land. There was expropriation and compensation for the 20%. Now you tell me the rest was bought when the land was useless, was worth nothing before it had been valorized. So I don't know if that's
we heard this
ethical or not.
We heard this expression many times. Do you think that Rawabi is a Palestinian settlement?
No, it's not a settler. It's not. They're not. No. Settlement has to be Israeli. It has to be. I mean, otherwise it's not a settlement. Does it look like a settlement? Is that your question? Does it look like a settlement architecturally?
And also the way that was done. You said it wasn't confiscated land. So I assume you don't go
No,
that way.
Israeli settlements are aggressive emplacements of a colonial population in our midst. Rawabi is not. It's an ugly, possibly inspired, I'm told, by Modi'in, by the way, not by the settlements per se. But it's also, you could argue, that it's equally inspired by Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Egypt. So let's not take this thing. I mean, let's go back to neoliberalism, if you wish, not to Zionist settler colonialism in order to understand what Rawabi is. Now, the idea that Rawabi, in building it, he was buying stuff from Israel and subcontracting to Israeli companies. Everybody does that in Palestine. So, I mean, again, that's not, he does not single them out for that. You want to talk about it as an issue and a problem, that's separate. He's just one of those who engage in that sort of business.
Yeah, because that's one of the main criticisms of Rawabi, that it's complacent with Israeli apartheid and supports its industrial complex.
How? So do I when I use the Israeli cellular, Cellcom, which is, I mean, that's the standard way of doing business in Palestine. Go to Khalil, you'll see. That's all they do. It's every day. It's the choices that Palestinians have ended up having to make under occupation. It's not a program. It's not part. In the case of Rawabi, it's not a design to be that
intentional. Do you think
it's not? No, that's not what he's looking at. He doesn't care about. He doesn't attach to the issue of and many people. He's not the only one. Please, let's not forget. Yeah. Unfortunately, let's say, it doesn't attach to doing business with Israel. Any issue, it's normal. It's the only way you can do business in Palestine. Now, the question is, with who does he work? Does he work with, defense industries? I don't think so. I mean, does he work with military industries? No, he works with Israeli contractors who probably also do contracting for settlements and God knows what. But haven't you seen what goes around? We have 50,000 Palestinians working in settlements every day. What about them?
He did receive a donation for 3,000 trees from the Jewish National Fund, which is a bit unfortunate.
And he should have returned them. I know he should have sent them back.
But
I don't think that's the biggest of the.
No.
I mean, ask about how it is you buy land for 3,000 dunams, the dinars a dunam, which is its value on the surface, and then you dig down into it, hundreds of meters, and extract that stone, which is the natural resource of this country. He's not the only one. Everybody in Palestine does this. And all you do is pay an annual fee for a license to extract minerals. I mean, and then he's not only built the city with it, that's another, by the way that he cut costs, was that. And,
which way?
Using the stone, producing his own stone from land that cost him nothing. And that nobody imposes any environmental or what's the word, tax type of, there's different types of taxes on extraction of mineral, because there's no regulation of that sector in Palestine, for example. So, there's lots of ways that the city is an example of some of the worst, business, but very much accepted business practices in Palestine. I mean, there's the issue. Well, anyhow, there are lots of other issues too. I think that's important. I think the natural resource thing. I don't have any reason to criticize them. I mean, you're asking me questions about how successful it is. I don't think it's been very successful. How well designed it was. I don't think it was well designed. How beautiful. So all of those reasons. I don't think it's an unjust manifestation, if you wish, of capitalism. It's just a typical one, surprising in the Palestinian context because of what else you see. Hence, I understand you're, looking at it and focusing on it. Yeah, I mean, it's a very visible example of so much of what's not, is not linked to really the sort of economic development we need in Palestine. I mean, we needed that sort of money spent on middle income and low income housing outside cities, right? So that we can reduce congestion, so that people, kids, young couples can buy stuff for less than $50,000, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we need economically. But that needs a different sort of investor and a different sort of government as well, state. I mean, the state here is almost absent from those sort of major issues.
An expression that was used sometimes talking about Rawabi, especially from managing directors, was this idea of economic for peace.
Economic peace, yeah.
Yeah. Do you support their idea that, for instance, when we talk about the dependency from the Palestinians to the Israeli economy and the way these kind of deals, they close those links, do you think it increases the dependency of the Palestinians towards its occupier and sustains the status quo of the occupation?
Yeah.
Or do you think could be this economic path for peace?
No, certainly not. On the contrary, the economic peace paradigm it's become is, of course, let's not forget, it's an explicit Israeli strategy, right? Launched by Netanyahu in its newest form 15 years ago, but it has every 50 years we've had different every 10, 20 years we've had different versions over the last 100 years of economic peace as a policy linked to pacification of the Palestinians in the face of the continued advance of Israel or Zionist project and then Israel. The version that we've been living with, say, since Netanyahu came to power, and also don't forget, it's also since the post-Second Intifada, and it's in the period when this, reform was the slogan and state building was the aim and all of that. And that's when it was relaunched, because it was the Israelis' way of saying we want to, because don't forget, at that time it was alongside a peace process, which Israel remained engaged in. So for the Palestinians, so it's always been, economic peace has never been a two-way street. What I mean, it's not a matter of economic. And there is this idea of Palestinian-Israeli cooperation and capital, which USAID, for example, champions and is now funding, right? Trying to find people to do, but they're not being very. I mean, but there is that. I'm not talking. That's economic normalization. Let's call it, okay, which is separate. So what you were asking me before about Rawabi is more about normalization, economic normalization. My answer was that we're all normalizers, right, in Palestine. in this case, economic peace, it's a one-way street. So it's Israel's substituting serious political engagement with economic facilitation. And it's been resurrected by Netanyahu several times, and then by Bennett, and then these guys luckily, they're not even pretending to care about economic peace. On the contrary, they're quite happy to pursue economic war. So those Israeli Zionist leaders who were led a bit more finesse and vision realize that this is a useful tool. And the tool is that, and it links up ultimately to the question about neoliberalism in Palestine, because it's a tool to give you the chance to have a normal life while accepting that that's all you're going to get and don't really expect anything else. And if you do try and demand or shoot your way to anything else, you can, you know what we're going to do. So it's the carrot, right? While the stick is always being held up. So, it's always there in terms of more permits, in terms of businessman car, in terms of VIP, forget the security corporation. And then...
it's hard to.
Well, it's obviously linked to. It's part of, but it's a separate thing. No, you can have economic peace without security. I mean, if the PA wanted to, on the contrary, when they actually pretty much stopped security cooperation, that was when Israel was pushing whatever they could do economic peace. So, we know it's a policy, as all Israel, there is no economic policy Israeli economic policy towards Palestine economy. There is Israeli strategy to use the economic issues to secure their strategic security, settling colonial goals, right? So, Palestinians engaging in economic peace is not really on the table. You know what I mean? We accept it, though. So if they're going to give more facilities, people are going to take advantage of them. Now, the big question is, does this translate into the trade-off that I wrote about 12 or 13 years ago? Sometimes I wish I hadn't. Does it translate into the trade-off between NL and LL, neoliberalism and national liberation? I guess the last 10 years, let's say, have proven, in fact, that it's not the rise of neoliberal, it's the installment. I mean, it arrived a long time ago in Palestine. It was never really, it was there in terms of in people's minds, but never really explicit in the way the economy was shaping itself. That only became much more explicit, let's say, in the last decade. The sort of economy that's being, the extent to which the market is a free market. The constraints on the spurts of efforts of the state to be a developmental state or to be a properly regular. So the confrontations that ultimately end up happening between the state's incapacity to be the state and the private sector and the workers' demands, whatever they might be. Be it better regulation, be it easier facilities, be it less of a tax load, be it whatever, social security, etc. So that tension has never gone away, in the sense that neoliberalism is a half-baked project in Palestine. Neoliberal thought was influencing the PA in its conference in Bethlehem. It influences Bashar Masri's, etc. It influences the corporate, marketing. You look at it, you see it everywhere in the world, same. And we know how it feeds into the sort of economy it creates in terms of materialism, in terms of imports. You know what our second largest separate category of Palestinian exports to Israel and the rest of the world is? What we're talking about, maybe 1.5, maybe 2 billion, I'm not sure. The first largest category is re-exports. So it's partially finished goods which we finish and then re-export, either to Israel, back to Israel, or internationally. The third largest, I believe, is stone and marble, which is like 700 million. The second largest is recycled waste, metal waste, which is these guys who go around in the streets. You ever seen them? Who wants to buy this? Do you want to sell this? We can't miss them. And there you see them every day collecting this industrial waste that we leave, not to mention the cars. So, I mean, this is sort of leading to that. So this is all, a neoliberal, totally gone wild in the sense that it's very poorly regulated and very minimally understood and allowed to do what the market allows it to do, whatever it is, in terms of the type of services, in terms of the type of preferences, in terms of the values that people import or, global, etc. And yet, I don't think the flame of resistance or the mass acquiescence in Israel has changed. The Palestinian people remain very patriotic. They're not willing to go and die for it in the way they used to, maybe. They're not willing to see their kids' futures sacrificed by getting shot in the back for nothing. Things like that. Now, I don't think those are neoliberal. That's people are learning, thank God. I mean, the second Intifada was a complete failure. It was a violent breakdown of our ability to resist, and then the 10 years that followed of submission, let's say, and security as number one priority. Also, there's nothing happening. But it's only since 2015, that things have started changing, despite the continued building of a capitalist economy. So I don't think that it's going to ultimately, that's not what's going to extinguish Palestinian resistance. It's not, neoliberal values or materialism or capitalism. The problem is, of course, the alliances that are developing, both between capital and the state here, and between capital and capital. Palestinian capital and not so much Israeli.
But let me ask the question a different way then. Can a thriving economy under these neoliberal practices ever lead to a free Palestine?
No. I mean, we've lost the way in that respect, both in terms of the as I said, the market being too free and nobody able to do much about it. In terms of losing sense, I think, of the initial goal, not the question of Israeli withdrawal and Jerusalem. I mean, those issues, there's been no compromise to be on paper. There's been no Palestinian position that has changed since 2020, since 20,000 Camp David, to be honest. And Abu Mazen can claim that, fairly. But the overall goal of not just good governance, but a state that provides, which was originally the PLO's, even Fatah's sort of persona. The slogan of al-ard wal-insan, the land and the land and people. So it was never this sort of blind national. It was all about people being free. So, the social contract or the social justice, let's say, part of the revolutionary PLO has totally sort of been disarray, is in total disarray. I don't say it's not there, but it's in disarray. And the diplomatic achievements of the PLO have stopped. We've gotten where we got to. Nothing seems to be. So in some ways, I would argue that if we had, given the minimum options that remain, if the state was still committed to being a development state, it could play that role in the sense that it's maybe its only way of resisting is building a strong economy and bringing and making sure people stay in Palestine and making sure that they have jobs and making sure that they can travel freely and live decent lives, because if they don't, they'll emigrate. And so that sort of a default position is not passively, but it has to be, if it can be, without political change, I don't know what I'm saying is going to happen. But if there were some political change, it could lead to the sort of, strengthening Palestinian economic weight in the balance of this struggle. So that, if Israel imposes, sanctions, we can somehow withstand. If, we need to, it's not only about, economic warfare. I'm not talking about economic warfare, but I'm talking about, boycott, for example, this whole question of working in Israel, the whole question of working in settlements. At what point, is the PA going to turn around and say that 250,000 workers in Israel is more than we should be permitting. And how are we going to do something about that? 70% or 60% of the people have no form of social protection. What are we going to do about that? So there's some key issues that I believe are still, I don't call them low-hanging fruit, but they're key, priorities. They're immediately available. They're areas where somebody should be doing something.
So you're talking about a strong state.
Well, developmental state, which was the original idea, but then was lost along the way between Paris, Washington, and Oslo, let's say, in the 90s. So, our problem when it comes to that, though, is that there's no longer really an organized left in Palestine. So there's nobody pushing for that. The, patriotic bourgeois national movement is in power and is enjoying the fruits of power and is not very inclined to change the status quo. And the people have gotten to the point where they are happy that the social contract, which is that we can't deliver national liberation, but we can deliver decent life and social security, is also threatened because there's no ability to really ensure that. I mean, some people we all know that a lot of people are doing well, but we also know that the numbers of poor only increased. Registered poor only increased since Corona and haven't gone down since. The number of unemployed has gone down in the West Bank from 18 to 12 or 13, but 12 is still big. And the only reason that's happened is because 25% of your labor force is working in Israel. So what does that mean about dependency? So it keeps, there's a lot of interrelated issues. So it needs a total mindset change. And you're not going to find that except here in this institute.
Yeah, I mean, and not to mention that it's very hard to build a strong economy when you don't control the resources or you don't invest anything in agriculture.
Lashing out at the PA for failing.
Yeah. But I mean, the PA is investing almost next to nothing in agriculture, for example, which is arguably a very important source of economic growth.
I know, but the PA is investing nothing in anything. There is no longer a development budget, and there's this. They'll keep telling you, the budget of the Department of the Ministry of Agriculture is only 2% of the general budget. But I mean, the government itself is a question mark about whether or not all of that is of any use. So it's not a matter of how much. The question is, there's no development budget because they can't even cover their current expenditures, right? So the only public investment that is worth noting and should be noted is the Palestine Investment Fund. The Palestine Investment Fund is working in agriculture. It's working in alternative energy. It's working in trade logistics. It's working in industrialization. It's actually playing the role of, risk taker. Mazzucato talks about, the state taking the public investment, leading, crowding in private investment. But we're talking about a fund which is, a sovereign wealth fund, which has put most of its money in Palestine rather than abroad. So it's playing that sort of role to the extent that you can expect anybody to do so. But according to the market forces and with very limited, understanding that they're going to only be able to achieve incremental energy independence is one of their major issues. And it is a key issue on the whole question of dependence. But that's something that takes years. Area C is an important thing. Agriculture, they've done a lot of stuff in agriculture. So anyhow, all I'm saying, yes, the PA, the government, but it's not only agriculture that's neglected. Social, the poorest only got one payment out of 3 last year. Industrial policy is non-existent. There's no support for trade promotion. There's, no ability to establish proper logistic facilities at borders. Because of it's not only the PA's incapacity, it's the Israelis. Don't forget, whenever there is something that you can do, like I was talking to somebody in PIF, it's supposedly an advanced stage of an agreement with the Israelis on a bonded warehouse, a dry port, which would be a major advance in terms of the whole trade facilitation blockage. So our issue with Israel on trade is, of course, partly about trade policy and that we're part of their system. We're underdeveloped. We're less developed. They're more developed, so they're less protective, but it hurts us. But that's one issue. But the other issue is, of course, that all of our trade, 100% of our trade either comes from or through Israel. 45% comes through Israel. Of our imports, we're talking about 45% of 5 billion now, I think. And that is the revenue is captive, right? And we know all about the transfer, etc. So the idea that the Israelis would accept a bonded warehouse where the Palestinians collect their own customs on 45% of the clearance revenue that Israel is currently. I mean, I was told that, no, we're at an advanced stage, but we haven't yet done the protocol. I said, well, wait till you get to the protocol. You just wait to see what they're going to insert. And that's the way they've been dealing with this since Oslo, since Paris.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to just go back a little bit because something that struck me about Rawabi is the whole premise feels a bit odd because if you're trying to create a debt market in people like taking on loans, that requires stability, which is considerably hard to do in Palestine, given that it lives under occupation. So why would Palestinians take up loans for like 20 or 25 years to live in Rawabi when the future is so uncertain?
But they're not only taking up. I mean, if you look at the statistics of the bank's loan portfolio for residential, right? I'm not sure the numbers anymore, but it's a huge part of the outstanding credit of the banking system, more so than, well, that and personal credit. So I think it's identified in the PMA statistics as one is residential and another one is personal consumption, right? Mm-hmm. That's like maybe 60% of all of the private sector outstanding credit. Now, I mean, people are not just buying. It's not only Rawabi. I mean, people are buying everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
And debt-financed real estate acquisition because it's the only way that remains.
It's that new? It's a new trend? Or
yeah, it's the last 10 years. I think it's really picked up. It was there. I mean, I came and bought something in 2000 when there was hardly any mortgage bank facility. There was one or two banks that offered mortgage for residential purchase. Today, everybody does, and it's a huge, huge market. So it's one of the successes of the financial sector for sure. It's a risky one would assume, but the reason it's not risky. So again, not talking specifically about Rawabi, but talking about the outstanding credit in the hands of young or other homeowners, mortgage. Is probably half of them are government employees. And so it's all linked, of course, to the fact that banks can be pretty much assured that the government's going to pay salaries. So as long as the government can pay salaries, which it's been able to do even at 80%, then the banks are okay. They don't see it as a risk. And in fact, they increase their own the burden that it probably doesn't because they probably charge people interest on the outstanding. So they reduce payments to 80%. So if they know that you're getting 80% of your salary, you'll only have an 80% that month. But of course, the amount that you're not paying, I think you're paying, and they're earning interest. So the banking sector is booming. It's the most successful sector on its own. It's small. I mean, not that small any longer, but it's booming in terms of profits, in terms of services, in terms of fintech. It's got a great market, and it's and there's more coming. There's more real estate development. There are more versions of financing that you can go for. But don't forget that not everybody goes for bank financing. Many people buy from the developer, and they give him 600 checks, to cover whatever 12 times 20 years. Seriously, 480. You can get something like that. And you don't get he keeps the tabu, the title deed, until you paid everything. So, there's a huge informal financial market, as big as the formal one I would have thought. I mean, where do you think all this comes from? The moment the PA declares bankruptcy, the rest of the country goes bankrupt, to be honest. So, too big to fail.
Yeah, so the banks are sustained on the back of
Absolutely.
government.
They've extended as much credit as they can. Already there's that. So there's the actual money that the PA owes the banks, which is, I think, $4 billion. Mm-hmm. Less maybe.
And are international donors also making sure that the PA doesn't fail? Because a lot of the budgets...
Somebody is. I don't think it's the international donors. Financially speaking, no. But financial aid now is under half a billion a year, so it's not even 5%. It's not even 5% of the GNP. It's nothing any longer. It's not an issue like it was in 2010 when foreign aid it was 1 year 2.5 billion out of GDP. It was maybe 20% of GDP. Now we're talking about less than 5. So, I mean, no, but obviously the political consensus that the PA should remain in place for other reasons, is the only reason that there's not, a risk factor there. Now, would that change? I don't know. I don't think so. That's not on the cards. And Israel, too. I mean, we're, to be honest, too big to fail for Israel, I think, more than anybody. It's a terrible situation. That's why I don't feel especially, acrimonious towards the political regime. I don't think anybody could have done much better. We could have if we had a democratic system and if we were angels, but we're not, and we're not. We don't, and we're not.
But you do think that then the role of the international community is also to keep the status quo, like the 40 billion.
The international community is to blame before Israel, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Europe in particular. Europe is hypocritical and double-faced and colonial, to be honest. All the Europeans ultimately will defer to Israel before they give any serious credit to our rights, to our national rights or economic rights, even economic. They do nothing about these trade and movement access. Quietly they talk to Israelis and say, but that's not. There's a lot of stuff they could do. They could provide financial aid to this because Israel is illegally deducting $250 billion a year. Okay, do something. I mean, they're doing nothing. So it's because of their own issues and their own fascism in Europe. I know, and Ukraine and so on and so forth. But this is something that's been going on for 75 years, guys. So there's accumulated historic responsibility, which nothing is happening in Europe to give us an impression that it's moving differently, except in a few people like you who care. But in terms of government policy, not to mention the Americans. Let's not even talk about the Americans. That's just, so that's where the international engagement could have made a difference, and it's not.
We could just ask, it's related to this we were speaking about with all the money that came since Oslo from international donors. Where did that money go?
Yeah, it's $40 billion, they say. And I think it went to a lot of, I don't think it was misspent in any reason. It was poorly targeted, much of it. Not much of it, a lot of it. Much of it was very well targeted in certain periods for inevitable humanitarian. I think that we all agree that if nothing else, should do no harm. So aid should do no harm. In that sense, I don't think it did any harm. It didn't do as much good as it claims or aimed, but a lot of it was at times and remains food aid, cash transfers, humanitarian relief, post-war construction, all of that sort of, that angle. Aid for governance, I think, was a waste of money, mainly, because I think we had a better governance structure in 2000 than we have now. No less able to deal with the challenges. We still don't have a proper automated government management system, information system still. There have been so many projects, so many, the British, Spanish, everybody tried to build unified portals and business and government. Anyhow, so, a lot of the governance reforms just really kept people in place. And aid to the economy, I think, has been patchy. Some of it's been useful for, relief or supporting the poorest, SMEs and helping startups more recently and that sort of thing. And the rest of it was in infrastructure. And again, anything, I hate to say it, but every time I go down to Jericho, I thank USAID for that road that they made it easier for Palestinians to get from Ramallah to Jericho. Fabric of life, yeah. It's obviously, we know that it's built so that Palestinians stay off the Israeli roads as much as possible. But that's not the only example. Wastewater, it's not only USAID, of course. The Europeans have been huge on infrastructure, wastewater treatment, all of that. Power, that's not a waste. None of it is a waste, I don't think. Except for some of the governance aid, especially rule of law and security sector, of course, took a lot of those 40 billion. Again, if you ask Palestinians, one of the main reasons they continue to support the PA is because we don't have a situation like we have an Arab community in Israel. People being shot every day, huge organized crime, nobody can escape, protection rackets, etc., 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 etc. So there is that sense that the PA still represents the rule of, the ability, what do they say about sovereignty? One of it is the ability of the state to impose the rule of law. So it's still able to impose security, especially in Ramallah, but in fact, pretty much in the main cities, it's the same case. Though, that's in terms of the sort of protection from criminality. But when it comes to managing social strife, then you have issues like, questions like that when that guy was killed in Khalil and the popular outcry and the way it was, confronted by the security forces is an example of, the problematic aspects of the security. But again, every country that I know has those sort of, counter, no, I'm not talking about counter, riot, suppression, so what are we going to be angry the Palestinians also have it,
Yeah, but all that money to security isn't keeping Palestinians safe from the Israelis.
From Israel,
so
yeah, but they never said that was the deal. They never said that we were going to, we're all in the same boat together. They're not getting, they can hide in their barracks when the Israeli military comes into Naples. I know. And I think ultimately there's limits to that, and the Israelis know it. That's why they're trying to avoid it. Not because the Lion's Den guys are going to... It's because the PA security forces cannot stand the shame of that continuing to happen. And at some point, they're going to lose control over their old guys. That's the point. So that's good news. You know what I mean? I.e., so I go back to the thing that, I think by and large, the Palestinian people have not accepted they've expect indefinite occupation, but they don't acquiesce in it. And any chance they can have little to do something about it, they do. Those who have no options do what we see happen. And I think that's going to continue to be the sort of landscape in the coming couple of years. A status quo punctuated by uprisings and violent crackdowns, or more likely Israeli complete craziness, which will result in God knows what. I think that's more likely than anything.
Acabaste de ouvir uma entrevista com o economista Raja Khalidi, gravada em maio de 2023, durante a produção da série Indústria da Ajuda na Palestina. Como te dizia antes, esta entrevista foi gravada antes da intensificação da agressão e genocídio em Gaza, a partir de 7 de outubro. Foi feita por mim, Rafaela Cortês, e pela Margarida David Cardoso, que a cortou e escreveu este texto que te estou a ler. O Bernardo Afonso editou o som. Ele e o Ricardo Esteves Ribeiro estiveram envolvidos na pesquisa deste tema. Joana Teresa Batista fez a identidade gráfica. O Lucas Grimou de Freitas, a estratégia de comunicação, e o Fred Rocha tratou do website. Podemos consultar aí em fumaca.pt todos os episódios, uma série de outras entrevistas, visualizações de dados e uma extensa lista de livros, filmes e podcasts que nos foram úteis nesta investigação. Fazem ainda parte da equipa Fumaça António Assunção, Luís Marquês, Maria Almeida e Nuno Viegas. Até já!